Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Today we've got Jake and Simon back on the show today. We've got a few subjects we want to go through. First of all, a little bit of housekeeping. Unbanned by Shimano. We'll talk a bit about the St. Perrin team. And the main subject of today's podcast is going to be categories of bikes. We've been talking and we've noticed that an awful lot of bike manufacturers are toning down their SKU count, and we've got some ideas around how bikes are going to be categorized.
Really simple.
Yeah, keep it simple is going to be the idea. So, deep breath, we are officially unbanned.
Yes.
So this is the story that we sort of published and put out there after sort of a disappointing response from Shimano about the crank recall. Simon and I shared that story with you. That story got picked up by Road CC.
And numerous others.
And Cade Media. Thanks Cade Media for those shout outs. Interested, I think that went all the way to the top of Shimano.
I'm pretty sure it did. And what was really kind of great to read was all the comments from everybody that watches the channel and the feedback they were giving us, which was fantastic.
The comment section was fantastically well balanced. There were fors and against. There were people sat on the fence, see both sides of the argument. Absolutely, The comment section was fascinating. And from what we understand from Shimano, they read pretty much every comment.
Yeah.
So well done, guys. Whatever you put down in their comments, you have got noticed, and things are starting to happen, I think. So where we are now.
So what are we doing now?
Jake will be doing a lot of the work on this. Is that we can now take your cranks back and do the inspection. We'll do what we've always done, which is we take the cranks apart, we wipe them down, we take a picture of them, we put the picture on the form, we send the form to Madison, and we put something in that bit that says pass or fail, but we never write the word pass. Correct. And we're going to let Madison and Shimano make that decision for us, and that's where we are.
Which is great, which is as we were operating, so back to the status quo.
Yeah, so there we go. So after a whole bunch of media circus, which could have, from one little throwaway comment in a very benign video, went all a bit bonkers. So lessons to be learned there from all of us, I think.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to start filling the format again. I've been missing it. It's one of my favourite tasks is to take apart some Shimano cranks. And
it is crazy, actually, when you think about that form, that with all the modern technology, we are essentially filling out a Word document.
Yeah, well, come on, a PDF.
We make it a PDF because no one at Madison will be able to open a Pages document from a Mac or a Google Sheet. So we have to do it in a Pages document, make it a PDF and then send it in.
A simple online portal would have been much more.
You can't just upload an image to an online portal and keep track of whose cranks belong to what. The amount of...
Anyway.
But let's not get banned again.
No, I'd like to say thanks to Shimano for letting us do it again.
Thanks to Shimano for letting us do that again. Our customers really appreciate it. It streamlines our servicing procedure. So
thank you.
And thank you for listening to all the comments. So, okay. St. Perrin.
Yeah, St. Perrin. So basically, if you don't know, St. Perrin is a bike shop down in Cornwall. And also, they run a continental race team, one of the only continental race teams in the UK left. Mm-hmm. Trinity, which is also reportedly in a bit of hot water at the minute, and St. Perrin. And they had, a couple of years ago, some quite large sponsor controversy.
Lapierre.
Where they had Lapierre, also termed Snappier bikes, where they had a lot of problems with the steerers snapping. St. Perrin said that it was a problem with the frames. The mechanics said Lapierre said that it was a problem with the St. Perrin mechanics not using torque wrenches and over tightening them. Yep. And it all got very public and very messy. And long story short, they terminated the sponsorship and St. Perrin were left short of bikes.
So what do you do in that situation?
Well, St. Perrin had the wonderful idea to go to AliExpress and reportedly purchase a lot of UCI non-compliant frames, which is a bit of an interesting one for a UCI compliant team. And these frames were dubbed Wuhan weapons by the riders, which is a nice one.
I'm guessing that's because they're manufactured in Wuhan.
Yeah, yeah, which I think is quite funny. But it's apparently a road carbon integrated road bike disc frame. All the riders were apparently complaining about it. But the big controversy that came in is that St. Perrin are reported to have stuck their own UCI approved frame stickers on them. These are not UCI approved bikes, and they have been purportedly fraudulently sticking UCI frame stickers on it, which obviously does not fly. And they've been caught out by this.
It doesn't fly very well, does it? So the reason that we're covering this in the podcast, because we don't normally do racy type stuff, because it harks back to a podcast we did a long, long time ago about the public's perception of the UCI sticker and what it actually means and how important it actually is. And it's sort of bringing that UCI sticker to the fore.
Well, I think that's true, because I remember when I first bought a bike, I remember seeing it had UCI approved on it, and incorrectly I started to think, oh, that's a good thing. It's like they've rubber stamped it. This bike could be safe. It's good. It's passed a load of quality checks. Whereas what I obviously appreciate further down the road is it's really, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the geometry meets their regulations, etc.
Yeah. It's all about proportions and geometry. Yeah. There's nothing. There's no crash testing. There's no there's no minimum weight to the actual frame at all. It's all the minimum weight's on the actual bike, not the frame.
So I'm sure there's many people out there that look at that sticker and think, yeah, that's a good thing. It's like a kite mark type sticker in mind, So.
And I also think that a few brands play to that as well. And I've definitely been in shops and overhearing sales assistants.
It's UCI approved.
and almost selling it like it's a feature.
So something that clearly isn't going to race. Or
The actual having that sticker on your bike matters to such a small fraction of people. It's absolutely insane. Anyway, what do you think is going to come of Perrin?
Well, it's Cycling News did a really good article on it. I'd recommend reading it if you haven't already and if you're interested in it. But effectively, what it's going to come down to is I think it's pretty damning, the evidence that they have, and it's going to come down to a pretty hefty fine, which is apparently going to be somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 Swiss francs. Which is roughly equivalent to 90 grand in our
British
money,
pounds,
in Great British pounds, which I think would be pretty terminal for the team, which is a shame because the UK Conti scene is really struggling at the minute, and to have really the last team left go under.
It would be pretty tragic if it came
I think, it would be a bit of a nail in the coffin for the domestic scene, I think. So I hope that they can run through it. What they've done probably isn't right, but I hope that they can weather the storm, because it'd be a real shame to have Perrin go and not be left with no Conti teams at all.
Yeah.
But there's got to be lessons to be learned here, though.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I think as well, by the sounds of it, a lot of riders were bringing up quality concerns and stuff like that with the frames. It sounds pretty damning. I don't really know what there is to say about it other than...
It's interesting that the riders are bringing up the quality concerns, is this bike actually safe to ride on?
I think that was a big part of it, because it'd be perfectly fast. There's no reason why you couldn't...
Until it's not.
Until you come to a sudden stop.
Until you come to a sudden stop. And it's odd to me that you would, if you had their big problem with the Lapierres that they were breaking. And so if that's a big problem you had, I know they've been left short of a bike, but to then go to something that is even less reliable doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
It smacks a bit of desperation, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think the UCI are actually in a really interesting position here, because they must be sitting around that boardroom thinking, what the hell, we have to enforce our rules, but at the same time, we're about to send a team under, which they can't really afford to do. It's not like there's queues and queues of teams waiting to be on the UCI circuit. It's not like... It's a bit like having Formula One, isn't it? A team goes bankrupt and suddenly you've got 8 cars on the grid. You can't have that. You need teams to have a race series.
Absolutely.
So they've got some tricky decisions to make, I think.
But I think they're going to be slapped with a pretty hefty fine by the looks of it. I hope they can get through it, because it would be...
I hope the UCI can get through it. I honestly hope that the UCI...
I think the UCI will be fine.
Navigate it through it with the correct optics and...
they never...
come out of it
looking... The UCI aren't famed for their good decisions, are they? But...
It depends what side of the fence you're sitting on, Jake, I think, in terms of how you view decision making and the outcomes of those decisions.
100%.
But it's a fine line to balance here, as Paul says. You've got to slap them on the wrist appropriately hard enough for what they've done, but at the same time, you don't want to kill the team and kill cycling.
Kill investment in it. Yeah, absolutely. Talking of racing, I'm going to move on to our main subject of today, because it is around race bikes. So. The categorization of bikes, which is something that we've been talking about downstairs, and every time someone comes in looking for a custom build, it comes up, like what type of bike is it I'm after, and we've seen Trek famously try to reduce their SKU count, got rid of a few of their stuff in their range. I think we're seeing that across the board, where we've gone through that glut where we had aero bikes, climbing bikes, all road bikes, endurance bikes, and the road bike range is getting bonkers. Mountain biking was getting even more insane with free ride and all mountain, And then gravel came along, and all of a sudden we've got 10 different types of gravel bike.
And we can't decide on the types of gravel anyway, so it's like, you know.
So here's my argument in this. I think we're at a point where everything's getting simpler. We're at the era of integrated handlebars.
Yeah, I concur with that.
Increasingly amounts of integration in our race bikes.
Yep.
So I think we're almost at the stage where we can have race or not race.
That works for me.
in almost everything. And with the race, I liken it a little bit to like Le Mans racing. So you've got like a Ferrari, obviously on the racetrack, and the Ferrari that you can buy in a showroom, a sports car and a race car, and the difference between the two is insane.
Absolutely.
And I think that gap has got bigger than it's ever been before.
Interesting.
Is how I see it. Like we've seen from like integrated handlebars and service costs on headset bearings, and you know how small those headset bearings are coming on those canyons, etc.
Well, I think that's a key point. I mean, most people, well, not most people, but some people like, you know, would aim for a race bike because they think that's top of the art, that's got the best of everything, but they forget then the work involved in keeping on top of that, keeping its service well maintained, and the associated costs that go with that, and the fact that the durability of, because it's such a high spec, and there's compromises made in terms of over lightness that are not going to balance with kind of longevity of those parts, and you have to replace them more frequently, etc.
And so fragile now. We've seen a couple of race bikes that have taken small impacts from like derailleur hangers or something, breaking, and they're just gone, like snapped.
I think it's definitely a sort of interesting analogy between like the Le Mans car and the sports car, because I think it should go more that way in the bikes, because it's not like you shouldn't have something nice. I think everyone who wants a nice bike. I think
everybody aspires to have a nice bike.
Exactly. Everyone wants to have a nice bike, but you shouldn't necessarily have to have a race bike to have a nice bike. Because if you wanted a race, if you buy a race car, like a Le Mans car, for example, you're not going to drive that around the roads, because it's not.
And the suspension's all going to be set up for a track-type suspension as opposed to going over UK potholes.
Yeah, if you hit a pothole in a Le Mans car, you're going to shatter the bottom of it.
Or a speed bump, you know.
Yeah, and so but it doesn't mean you shouldn't have nice non-race bikes.
Correct.
And I think there needs to be a differentiation made where for something like a Time Outdoors X, it's not a race bike, but it's still a very, very nice bike. And that's the kind of gap that has come into the market, I think, where you still want a premium bike, you want a nice group set, you want a well-made frame, something that's going to last you a very long time and be really nice to ride. But it doesn't need to be a race bike.
But not break at the first sight of a pothole or corrode at the first sight of a bit of wet weather.
100%.
I think that's the key thing. And just seeing, even if you can buy into the race bike experience, are you really prepared for the race bike servicing?
And feel of it as you're riding it as well. Because you're going to get much more feedback from the road on a race bike than you would on an endurance type bike.
Yeah, some of them now are so stiff and so hollowed out, hardly any material to really give you any sort of sense. And if you're not really light, like you notice it all. It does come through as flex. Someone who's been like almost 90 kilos and now back down to 77. I definitely think back in the year I could bend things quite happily. You know, sort of 89 kilos was my heaviest, and so I think this is obvious in road. In road, I think it's really obvious where that differentiation is going, and the geometry for race bikes is pretty much standard. It's 73 degrees, give or take half a degree here and there. Not much is changing, and then in all road, you're changing by perhaps 1 degree here and there. It's not massively different. In gravel, it's going to be our biggest problem, I think. We've got gravel race and gravel riding, and then we have bike packing. I don't know whether that fits into its own category or not, or ultra distance type stuff, but you still have race versions of the ultra distance stuff as well, which is dead interesting. So gravel seems to be our category at the moment, where everything's just let's just throw
it's hard to pigeonhole it.
See what sticks.
Where would you put the Rondo that you rode the other day?
I don't know. That's what kind of sparked my whole thing, because it's such a confused bike.
Yeah.
It is. And I think I put in that review, it looks like really big, robust. It should have like 50mm tyres on there and like hammering down the really chunky gravel, and it's not. It doesn't look and ride like that at all. It's just so confused. And yet some race bikes now, almost like road bikes. The gravel world champs was one on a road bike pretty much.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, the gravel world champs, I wouldn't necessarily say is a good indicator for what's currently going on in the gravel bike scene, because the course is fairly tame, has been, because they need to be able to televise it and stuff like that to grow the sport, and it needs to be accessible because they have so many riders racing it. So they're not, I wouldn't necessarily say that Gravel Worlds would be the number one place to look at in terms of the innovation for gravel, because it was, I think the first time Van der Poel raced it, he did it on the Endurace. So that's not a gravel bike. It's got like 34 max tire clearance or something like that.
Yeah, but if you're racing at that level, pro level, you might have a bike for one race. It's
100%.
not about,
So gravel's still very much the undecided category in my mind. I think it's still the
so.
experimental category. People haven't really, or the brands haven't really decided what people want. I don't think the riders have really decided what they want.
Well, I mean, if you look at something like Gralloch, for example, a bit more of a proper gravel race, if you look at the variants of the bikes on the start line for something like that, it's crazy because there's not, at the minute, so for something like cyclocross, like I race quite a lot, you have a very strict set of rules that you have to adhere to. So you have 33mm tyres, handlebars have to be straight, it's very conformed and boxed, and they've worked those rules out over loads of years, and that's just what you have. And so all the bikes pretty much look the same, pretty much ride the same, because gravel's so new, and they don't have necessarily that framework to decide.
Yeah.
You've got someone like Dylan Johnson rocking up on a mountain bike with drop bars and 2.5 inch tires.
Which actually the GMBN videos around that was insane.
Yeah,
it's like started to fit drop bars to their mountain bikes.
Yeah, but you've got someone like Dylan Johnson who is doing like crazy,
really well,
and he's doing very, very well, and he's really pushing the limits of what you would necessarily class as a gravel bike. But then you've got Van der Poel rocking up to world champs on probably 38mm tyres, and it's like it's a world of difference, and they're two bikes that can be raced at the same race,
essentially in the same gravel headlight.
Totally,
absolutely. It's God knows where that's all going to go until the UCI get involved and decide on some rules, perhaps.
But I think for me it's more in terms of the sort of robustness of a bike that you get is what you kind of determine as a. Like for example, a very common gravel bike we see here is Mason. We see a lot of them, and those bikes they're aluminium, and they're built to last.
Yep. Most of their riders have about 45mm tyres on them. Yep. They kind of work.
And I wouldn't say it's not a race bike. It's still a nice bike, but it's not a race bike. And so there is somewhere in that line, there is somewhere the difference between the two. But I don't think that has yet been found for gravel. I think that's something that still needs to be worked out. Whereas road, I think, is becoming a bit more kind of conformed.
Well, I think it's becoming more and more established after its crazy days of aeroness and
Well,
stuff.
I think you can compare like a little bit maybe to the running shoe market. So, you have race shoes that you would wear for like doing a half marathon race, but you probably wouldn't do all your training in those or a marathon race. You train in a different pair of shoes because they're more endurance and obviously not as much impact, etc.
Just wear them out. Wear out your racing shoes like your Nike Flies.
Well, exactly, yeah. And I think the same happened with then there was this big breakthrough in terms of trail running, and where we live, we obviously have fell running or mountain running, and you had a different type of shoe for that, and a different type of shoe for trail, and then the two kind of merge in the middle. So when do I put my mountain or fell running shoes on, and when do I have my trail running shoes? And I want the best of both worlds,
Absolutely. Talking about mountains, let's talk about mountain bikes.
Yeah, the biggest minefield at the minute.
At the same time, it's the biggest minefield, but I also think there's some consolidation there. Cross country, for instance, I think is established. If you're cross country racing, you buy a cross country racing bike, and if you're not racing, you don't buy a cross country racing bike. No. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
Are people buying it because of vanity, because they want to be doing that? I mean, what leads people down that road?
I think we rarely see cross-country bikes in the shop anymore, do we?
No.
It's pretty rare, unless you are cross-country racing, doing stuff like marathon champs and things like that.
And if we do, for where we are, because there's not really much of a cross-country scene here, it's Trail Quest, mountain bike orienteer and adventure racing, off-road triathlons, probably where we see that market, which is still a race bike, I think. And then we see downhill, and that is a race category.
Yeah.
Full stop. And we see enduro, which is a race category, and that's all good. And then what's not race is
e-bikes.
Probably pretty much
e-bikes.
Yeah. In this day and age now, totally. Yeah.
It's pretty much anything 130mm to 160mm travel e-bike, and that's it. Everything else seems to have just died.
Yeah.
Apart from like the real hardcore enthusiasts.
Again, that's kind of natural sort of balancing of things in terms of where things fall and what people are aspiring to do with their bikes, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, and all that technology that we had about anti-bob pedaling and whether your bike is more orientated to pedaling up hills or more orientated towards the downhills seems to have just been thrown out the window now because e-bike.
Yep.
Yeah, if you want to go uphill, use an e-bike.
Don't care about climbing performance as long as I can get 2.6 inch tyres on the back there and it's got a good motor. Job done. It does beg the questions, what's going to happen to mountain biking as a thing?
I think it will go e-bike. I mean, it just makes sense, doesn't it? Because if you're buying an e-bike, it's effectively the same price as a trail bike anyway. Mm-hmm. There's no market difference in price now between an e-bike and a trail bike. And why wouldn't you? Even someone like me, I like riding bikes, I love trying hard. But if you have an e-bike, you can try equally as hard, but you just get more done.
Yeah, e-mountain bike. Amazing, no matter how fit you are, it's just great fun.
So like if you're not racing, it doesn't, like for the price market now, it does not make sense to not get an e-bike.
It's not prohibitive, true.
Which answers the questions, why wouldn't you buy an e-bike? It's because you're racing in something that's a UCI race, cross-country mountain bike, cross-country marathon, enduro, downhill. Although I do think enduro might go full on e-bike.
Yeah, because I mean, all the times are downhill anyway, aren't they? So it doesn't necessarily matter.
And quite a lot of the riders who do it also have e-bikes.
Yeah.
And would probably rather do it on their e-bike, I would say.
Other than Ian Atkinson.
Other than Jake's dad.
Some traditionalists out there.
Yeah.
So I think, it's going to be a very interesting couple of years because it's always, you need some market conditions to drive it, don't you?
I have a question. So if we're looking at this race to non-race, I think if we're thinking mountain bike is going to go e-bike, what would you want to see between road and gravel now that doesn't already exist to differentiate between a race and a non-race bike? For me, a big one would be headset integration. I think if we're talking about race bike service costs, we're talking about that sort of thing, is for a conventional bike, the main reason you have the headset integration with the cables and all that sort of stuff, number one is aerodynamics and number two is looks. Mm-hmm. And now, if you're not riding a race bike, you're willing to sacrifice aerodynamics. But it depends, do you think people would be willing to sacrifice the look of the bike, where you have some external cables, but the service cost is markedly cheaper, because when you come to do a headset, you don't have to remove the cables, you don't have to rebleed the brakes, that sort of thing. What do you reckon?
I think hopefully one of the big distinctions would be like general weatherproofing and serviceability. It's the thing, headsets that you can get to easily, so you're going to need to do some external cabling, bottom brackets which are threaded, frames that are at least category 2, category 3 rated, electronics that are properly waterproof.
I think that really comes down to, does the particular rider who's looking to buy, is it their heart or is it their head? The heart would say to me, I want a bike that looks good, and when I'm taking it out I feel proud, it looks great. If you're looking at it logically, you're looking at all these bearings and everything else, but how many people really buy logically versus emotionally?
Oh, you're so right. We're thinking like mechanics.
Yeah. Because when I see one of those, all I can think is when I've ridden this through winter and it's had a proper beating and I have to redo the headset, it turns a 15-minute job into a 2-hour job, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, that looks nice, it's got great lines on it, there's no cables, everything's hidden away, it just looks nice, I feel good. It looks nice, I feel good riding it. It might not have to have all that race geometry and the race wheels, but if it looks good and I get that good buzz when I go and take it out of the garage and jump on it, then that's a big plus to me.
So is it actually, it's not necessarily the ease of service that you need from a non-race bike, but the almost lack of service that you need in terms of, as you say, more weather sealing, it becomes more robust. Yeah. It's not necessarily those high performance parts like a ceramic bearing, but you have that additional weather sealing like you see on those Bitcoin bottom brackets that we have featured on the channel. They have an additional weather seal that you can fit. So it's not quite as fast as it would be when it's in its full race spec, and it's still a very nice premium bottom bracket, but it then adds that extra level of weather sealing that you compromise a little bit on the speed of it, but you still have that quality.
I would definitely compromise that for knowing that I don't have to worry about this. It looks good, I'm pleased to take it out and I enjoy riding it, and I don't have to be thinking about all these things all the time. It just works, and it works every day I want to take it out, and it needs minimal maintenance.
And the sales pitch might be, the extra weight that you're seeing from this bike comes from this, and this. And you're right, if you look at the headset bearings on a Specialized SL8, they are like the tiny...
razor thin, aren't they?
They must be running like 1.5 millimeter balls. They're absolutely tiny, razor thin. they're going to need replacing nearly all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, if we take an example from the new Time headset made by Chris King,
yep,
that is something that is definitely a premium product, but it's not necessarily a racing product, where this is a more kind of it's a longevity focused thing where you don't necessarily have to replace the bearings. You can service them instead. And so
now that's maybe what we should be thinking. It's like a bigger bearing that's actually serviceable. You could actually service that Chris King headset on a time without disconnecting the brake hoses,
which is what you need. That's what I would want from a non-race bike is.
But as a rider, I wouldn't be thinking about that, because that wouldn't even cross my mind. So, I'd be thinking about convenience, ease, what still looks good. So I think there's definitely two things in balance here in terms of it looks good, I don't have to worry about it, and you guys look at it from a mechanical point of view, what's involved to do it, and therefore the price of servicing is going to be lower because it's easier to get
So
to.
the sales pitch to you would be, this looks good and you don't have to worry too much about servicing. This looks good, but it's going to cost you a fortune in servicing.
Yeah, correct.
Just like have that on your horizon.
Yeah, and obviously some of there's more lifetime warranty things coming out and more things like that. I would feel good, all right, it's lifetime warranty. If anything goes wrong, I've got a lifetime warranty on it. I mean, so I'm seeing some trends where that's becoming.
We are definitely seeing, actually. Yeah. I've seen a few now. We're actually starting to see stainless steel headset bearings included. That's a trend that needs to continue for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm about to cook subject to you.
Yeah.
I think it's over to you guys. What do you think is going to be the future of this the road bike, gravel bike, mountain bike categories? Do you see it getting simpler or even more complicated than it already is? Get down in the comments. We're really, really keen to know. I think until the next time.
Well, we've got one thing. We want to get some feedback on our 785.
Yes, 785 builds. Yes. First of all, thank you for all of you who placed a 785 build to you. We're surrounded by boxes of stuff that's being posted out to you at the moment. We've got about 5 frames still stuck in customs, I believe.
Yeah, pallet coming next week.
Thanks, Brexit.
Yeah.
But loads of you have already received your frames and more are on the way. That's fantastic. And we have a little surprise coming up for us.
Special project coming up now.
Our next little project like that is going to be a winter build, like mud guards, lights, all sorts of stuff like that. So quite looking forward to putting that together. I want like a super slick winter build.
It goes to the point we're talking about. It's super slick, that looks kind of racy, but has all the benefits of being non-racy type thing.
There we go. Watch this space. In fact, watch the main channel. This is on the podcast channel. Watch the main channel. Please think about subscribing to this one. It always helps. And I think we're done. Great. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take it easy.
Cheers, guys.